Hi. I'm Ioana. Thank you so much, Denisa, for that very kind introduction. I'm also terrified, so we'll see how this goes. Aside from being terrified, as Denisa mentioned, I've been most of my life a illustrator and artist, and more recently, I've also taken the plunge into game development. For the next 30 minutes, I'm going to take us all on a little adventure. It'll have a few tangents, a few dice rolls, but for the most part, it's going to be a personal story that we'll be discovering together, partially through some drawings illustrated by yours truly. And I've been told I have an absurd number of slides, but this is what you get when you ask an illustrator to participate in a storytelling conference. This is the language that I know, most of all. Like some of you, I too was once a baby, which meant that at the time I was unbothered by boring human concepts such as the unwavering cruelty of the universe, or like the sometimes insurmountable odds it tends to throw at you, or the gallons of hope you're somehow required to find in order to face it. In these 29 minutes, I'll be taking you through a short dissection of how my love of fantasy and rolling dice has brought some light into the darkest corners of my life so far. If you've never played Dungeons & Dragons, you might not know that a lot of it is, well, it's gambling. I know the word has been very entangled in very complicated social and economical issues, more so here in Romania than anywhere else, but perhaps, or I don't know. But I promise you that this is the good type of gambling. Just bear with me. You might know from pop culture that D&D, for short, is basically a game centered around dice rolls. It involves chance, the luck of the draw, the literal roll of the dice, and a little bit of that good gambling. Because the currency we're gambling with in this game isn't money. It's actually something a bit more valuable. So the game itself is basically a story that the players are guided through by someone called a dungeon master. Yes, I know, it sounds funny. The DM, for short, creates this imaginary world, kind of like setting up a playground for players to explore through the characters that they create and embody. As a DM, you basically wield a great amount of power, but you are also at the mercy of the dice, just as much as the players are. To play D&D in any role is to humbly offer up your story on the altar of chance. So, if you've never played D&D before, that makes me extremely happy, because I'll be your dungeon master right now, and we'll get to play a little bit together today. And for that to happen, we're going to need to roll some dice. Ooh. And I'll be doing some dice rolling, and I'll be doing it in this very fancy dice tower that I've painted together with some of my good friends, specifically for this occasion. I wanted it to be very campy, very D&D. This is the D&D experience. There's a dragon and a dungeon tower. So, we have our dice, we have our tower. In order to get started, we also need a character. This is you. You are a young elven mage, talented beyond your years, but lately unemployed and short on patience. News has reached you of a duke in a fortress beyond the cursed woods. A bold, greedy man who pays well for odd jobs for those gifted in the arcane arts, such as yourself. The road is long, and the woods are not known for their kindness, but you are brave, gullible, and opportunity does not wait. So you pack what matters, and you step onto the path towards something hopefully better. While on the road, time passes quick, and dusk soon settles. The chill finds its way through cloak and courage alike. Behind the forested hill, the castle's tower catches the last of the light like a beacon, or perhaps a warning. Two paths wind into the woods before you, seemingly identical, but with different conclusions. Somewhere down one of them, an inn promises warmth and safety and a few hard-earned hours of rest. Should you go down the other, you will find only cold and darkness. The story beyond must wait. For now, we have to roll a dice. And I know it's controversial whether it's singular die or dice. For the purposes of this talk, we'll be referring to it as dice because it's easier for everyone. This is a dodecahedron. It's a d20. It's often the judge of whether or not any action you take succeeds or fails within a tabletop role-playing game such as D&D. Compared to normal dice, it has 20 faces that allows for a great degree of nuance of outcomes. But for us right now, at this crossing, if we roll a 10 or higher, we successfully find the path that leads to the inn. If we roll low, we find ourselves down the dark, empty road, vulnerable to dangers of the night. Ooh. What were the odds? We've obviously failed. I don't need to tell you that. The torch reveals nothing. No tracks, no sign. In the absence of certainty, you choose the path to the left, a gamble, as all things are in these woods. You walk and walk and walk. You walk until the inn feels like a rumor. Darkness gathers around you. You are cold and tired. Now, in these games, the roll is not the outcome. Rolling doesn't guarantee failure, but refusing to roll guarantees nothing happens. In games like this, the roll is the moment you surrender to uncertainty. In the beginning, you build your character, you equip them with swords and shields and magical items. You put them on the path, you decide what you want them to do, and then you let go. The dice leaves your hand, and for one suspended second, the outcome belongs to no one. Mathematically speaking, a 10 or higher on a d20 adds up to about a 55% chance for success. That's barely more than a coin flip in our favor, but it was in our favor regardless. And yet, we failed. And a bad roll at first, especially a 1, feels devastating. And that's a feeling that I've come to know all too well. 2.5 years ago, tangent, I was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer. That means that when they found it, the cancer had already spread beyond where it started, making it exceedingly dangerous. When I was diagnosed, my doctors were baffled. I was young, I was fit, I was in perfect health. I had no genetic mutation, no predetermining factors. It's been said to me numerous times, more times than I can count, I had just been very unlucky. And metastatic breast cancer doesn't currently have a cure. And I have to be on treatment in some way or another forever, or until it stops working, or until they find something better. I also have to get radioactive scans every 3 months to check if the disease is under control and stable, or if it's progressing and endangering my life. So since this diagnosis, I've been living my life in these 3-month increments. And every time, the fear and the uncertainty feel unbearable. But this hasn't stopped me from trying to live a life I treasure in between these very difficult moments. What I really love about games like D&D is that failure is almost never synonymous with the end of the story. In fact, some of the best narratives come from catastrophic dice results. We failed in finding the inn for the night, that's true, but what other exciting opportunities can be found for us in a danger we might not have chosen willingly? The fire is smaller than you'd like. the darkness larger. And in this darkness, you feel a shiver. You hear it before you see anything, a branch snapping clean, close enough so that your hand finds your weapon before your brain has a chance to catch up. Something is lurking just outside the light, and it's been watching since before you noticed them. What is it that stalks you? Here, as your DM, is where I would ask you to roll in order to do a perception check. In essence, that would mean rolling a dice to see how well you can suss out your surroundings, or in this case, a particular threat nearby. And because it's dark, and because you're already afraid, you'll need a 15 or higher, so that's a harder roll to beat, in order to perceive and identify what it is that is hunting you. Shall we? Hype me up. We rolled a 15, guys. We did it! The light catches it wrong. That is how you know. A shape that drinks the light rather than reflecting it. Patient at the tree line, as only some things are patient. You know what this is. The knowing sits cold in your chest. But you can name it now, and named things can be faced. It's a wraith, and wraiths don't hunger for gold or flesh. They hunger for something harder to replace, your very life force. Were you lucky? Because you can see the danger clearly, you can name it, you can prepare for it. But the ability to see the danger does not remove the fear. Nothing does. It often doesn't even prepare you any better for it. Sometimes it makes it even more difficult. And it takes a particular type of courage to move towards something you've feared your entire life. On this side of the roll, you see the danger clearly, and you must deal with the consequences of knowing what you're up against. But if you couldn't, would that make it easier or harder? Different information, but the road in front remains unchanged. The same next steps need to be taken. And I've come to find that that is what moving through life is like most of the time. It's not the absence of the thing stalking you in the wood, and it's not the ability to even see it clearly. It's just a decision to keep moving towards something meaningful, carrying whatever the role gave you, certainty or uncertainty, clarity or shadow. In my journey, I've found myself on both sides of that role more often than I can count. I've had scans that name things precisely, and scans that found new shadows that could only be watched until further progression. The knowing and the not quite knowing, for me, live in the same body, and are both kind of devastating in their own way. Now, despite some choices in my life, such as being a freelance artist and then getting into a very risky and kind of volatile industry that is game development, I'm emotionally very dependent on the idea of certainty. I know very well that any certainty is illusory at best anyway. One of the most challenging things for me, though, after the diagnosis was just sitting with it. Will my treatment work? Will my next scan be good? Is this newly discovered thing on my scan my disease progressing and getting closer to ending my life, or is it just a shadow or a fluke? In one recent conversation with an oncologist, he said to me, I hope that your biggest issue will just be sitting with the uncertainty and nothing worse. And I jokingly responded, but doctor, that is the worst. He didn't laugh. Throughout my life, I've always considered myself a sort of optimist, or maybe just a little bit delusional. I've always looked at challenges with a certain degree of certainty, illusory though it was, that nothing catastrophic can ever happen to me. This optimism, I think, was reinforced by what was seemingly a very lucky succession of very good things happening to me after any bad thing happened in my life. During the pandemic, I was extremely burnt out and going through a very rough patch, as I'm sure many of you were too. My experience definitely not singular in this. And I was reeling with grief after losing my beloved cat. I was socially isolated, and I was working 10 to 12-hour days on my first video game called Bear and Breakfast. And I would inadvertently develop a lot of anxiety and stress, worrying about anything and everything in my life, but also in the world at large. And I would often try to soothe that compounding anxiety with my optimism. I would think, it's going to be okay. Like, nothing catastrophic has happened this far. I'm sure everything will work out in the end. And when our game launched in 2022, everything did work out, actually. It did much better than expected. It was received very well. We made a lot of fans. People were thrilled. I was thrilled. My optimism was confirmed and reinforced. Little did I know, it was still 3 dice in a trench coat. Every time I play D&D, before I roll any dice, there's always something in me that believes a good number will come up. That feeling, that almost unbearable want of a specific outcome, the good one, obviously, that's optimism. And it's something so deeply and profoundly human, something that has carried me, and I assume many of you, through some of the hardest challenges in our lives. In fact, this journey through these cursed woods would have arguably never taken place at all if not for an optimistic outlook on the chances of success in reaching the fortress. But optimism is something you have or you don't have on a given day. It rises and falls with circumstance, with results, with how the last roll landed. It's weather. You can't always choose it, and you can't always sustain it. And when it fails you, because the results come back wrong, or the world does another terrible thing, when the number is bad on the dice 3 times, 4 times, 10 times in a row, it can leave you with little to no light, inside or out. 3 nights in these cursed woods. 3 nights with something terrifyingly patient at your back. On the 3rd, as your fire is about to run out, it makes its move. A wraith is a creature that makes no sound and gives no warning, just cold, the kind of cold that has nothing to do with the temperature outside. In an instant, it closes the gap and it lunges at you. You know what it wants, nothing material. It hungers for your very life force. The fight begins, every attack a dice roll, every violent lunge a chance to be wounded. As the wraith is going to attack you, I'm going to roll again, but there are 3 possible outcomes here, and I'm going to show you the outcomes before I roll. On a 1 to 9, you will critically fail at avoiding the onslaught. You will get the full brunt of the attack, the wraith's claws digging deep into your skin. You will be very wounded, and the cold will feel overwhelming. If we roll a 10 through 19, you will only be partially injured. You will manage to dodge the wraith's full force just in time, but will be overcome by sudden, sharp pain of a gaping wound in your arm, a little too slow to get out of the way. Solely by rolling a natural 20, so a 20 on the dice, we will manage to get out of the way completely, but only until the next attack, when you have to roll again and face the same insurmountable odds once more. So there's 1, maybe 2 outcomes here that are not completely terrible, but they bring little comfort regardless. Because even on the 20, which is a long shot, the promise of a new challenge lingers, so it's a temporary reprieve at best. The constant barrage of attacks, the seemingly infinite potential for horrible outcomes, is where optimism fails, in the face of odds that are stacked against you. Optimism might look at this and try to find the good in it, try to believe in the only 2 mildly bad outcomes. It's going to be okay. But hope looks at it, picks up the dice, and rolls anyway. Because hope is something you do. It's active, not passive, some would say a choice. And it doesn't require a favorable disposition or even confidence in a good outcome. Come what may, the only way out is through. That's a 14. Not terrible, but still not good. Not a 20. That roll felt hard, unfair, and it actually was hard. But what if it hadn't been a single straight roll? What would it have been like if we had had something working in our favor? In D&D, you build your character over time in ways that make these very hard rolls less punishing. Throughout a game, as your character gains experience, you invest points into traits that could make them a little more resilient. You also find and collect gear, items, and other useful protective things that could mitigate some of the pain. And with enough time, you can learn spells or find companions to help you along, and we call these modifiers. So you remember about the magic ring of resistance in your bag that you came across in your youth. You didn't even know you needed it until the wraith showed up, so you put it on your finger now. The wraith does not retreat. The cold comes again, even deeper this time, more deliberate. It has noted your survival and adjusted accordingly. It reaches for the soft places now, the parts of you that are hardest to defend. But you put on your ring of resistance, and after surviving the previous blow, even if just barely, you've let yourself grow stronger in ways you couldn't have anticipated. And so when we would have to roll again and again, over and over, we'll modify these results and add a +10 to whatever number comes up on the die. And that's what cultivated hope looks like. Instead of certainty, it just means growing better odds, built slowly, over time, on purpose. In the past 2 years, while navigating my new normal, my life with metastatic breast cancer, I've had to build up these modifiers for myself many times. In the beginning, I was under the impression that they need to be lofty goals, like trying to be healthier by giving up everything that still gave me a little pleasure in life, or working out like I was preparing for a zombie apocalypse, or using all of my waking hours and minutes to research every bit of information on my disease type and my treatment and clinical trials and studies and everything. And while I still believe these goals to be important, I won't lie and say that I've managed to fulfill any of them sustainably. But I also won't deny that the attempts have been helpful regardless. And most often, in the truly dark moments when it's hardest to see the road ahead, it's the small things that seem to add to my dice rolls. Lately, I've been thinking about how brushing your teeth before bed is an act of hope, actually. To believe that there will be a future version of you that wakes up the next day and would appreciate having been taken care of the night before. Or how I've had to learn to go on a run without thinking of it as a preparation for a future marathon, a plan that could crumble under the weight of the next scan result. Rather, treating a run simply as a life-affirming act, a good memory, a good feeling in my body right now. And some modifiers you can build alone, in the small acts that nobody sees but you. Like letting yourself feel the joy of a present action without the guaranteed payoff in the future. But some things you cannot roll for by yourself. Like many horrible diseases, cancer is an isolating experience. Not simply because you are ultimately alone in your body and your mortality, as we all are, but also because there comes with it this expectation that others will shy away from us and our pain. That you will have to walk the road through the dark forest alone and face whatever it is out there by yourself. That fear had gripped me intensely at the start of my encounter with this disease. Without meaning to, I started masking my pain, my fears, my doubts. I would try to put on a brave face for others, but for myself as well. When I started my treatment, that almost involuntary thought of, there's no way it's not going to work, I mean, it came up from time to time, and the initial scans showed good results, so it was easy to be brave. But there were moments where I didn't have any strength left to mask or to be brave. I had a recurrence almost a year after being initially diagnosed. That meant new spots of cancer had appeared in my spine after I had gone through surgery and treatment and radiotherapy and a bunch of other things. My optimism, that certainty that things would work out in the end, I felt that evaporate instantly the day I saw my scan results. When people talk about cancer, they often refer to it as a fight, that you either emerge from victoriously or that you sadly lose. And this phrasing has its problems even outside of metastatic cancer, but it becomes particularly harmful when your cancer isn't curable. It brings with it this black and white thinking, or at least it did for me. I either beat it or I don't. I either achieve remission or I don't. And if I don't, then the outcome will never be good. My optimism will have no good role to believe in. The road ahead is lost anyway. Why bother doing anything anymore? In my playthroughs of Dungeons and Dragons, what I eventually learned was that ultimately, every great D&D story is a group story. The lone hero narrative is a fantasy, even within the realm of fantasy. Had I been alone then, in my despair, I would have not been in this room today. As the forest thins, you arrive at a crossing. The bridge is gone. What remains is debris, rotted rope, and a ravine that can't be bothered to show you its bottom. You need to get across, but there are simultaneously too many options and seemingly none at all. You sit there wondering what to do. And then you hear it. Familiar footsteps behind you. You turn, and there they are. Your companion, their pack hastily put together and leaking goods, their expression leaving no room for argument. They caught up. And the forest feels slightly less dark than it did a moment ago. Because our elven mage and their new fighter companion can now work together, I'm going to roll 2 dice at the same time for this. This is what we in D&D call rolling with advantage. And this roll is not a heroic check or some legendary feat. It's just 2 people working together and doing what neither could do alone to make something that seemed impossible become manageable. So we're going to need an 8 or higher to successfully get across, and we'll roll 2 dice, and we'll choose the higher of the 2. Unexpected, but a failure. But even despite this failed attempt, you try again. The ravine isn't going anywhere, and neither are you. That's a 10, so a success. Eventually, through a combination of axe skills and magical prowess and a little bit more time than you thought initially you would need, you put together the remnants of the bridge. Held up through new logs, enchanted into the right spots, you cross the ravine together. To have someone by your side in moments that feel unbearable is often the only way to bear them at all. I had friends and people who loved me, who saw me journey into the dark woods and followed me there regardless, who saw me falter, who saw me despair, who always, always did their best to help me bear the unbearable. I didn't have a word for what they were doing for me then, but I do now. Because the act of hoping in its fullest form is never entirely solitary. Isolated hope that exists only inside one person with no connection to others tends to collapse under its own weight. There are days when you will be unable to carry the hope, and so it is then that someone else must pick it up and carry it for you until you are ready to reach for it again. We live in a culture that is very deeply invested in the mythology of solitary resilience, the lone hero who endures. We often celebrate people who don't need anyone, who face the hardest things quietly and emerge intact on the other side. And there's this entire industry built around the idea that the right mindset, the right habits, the right personal discipline can carry you through anything. But it's an incomplete picture. For me, it implied that you need to always do it yourself, and that in some way needing help from the outside was a weakness. When working on our game during the pandemic, I had to learn how to delegate some of my work to others the hard way. I was already burned out, I was stressed, but I still wanted to do everything myself as a testament to my skill, my ambition, my resilience. And to have chosen to follow that instinct would have cost the project and the rest of my team. And so in accepting help and collaboration professionally, I learned a valuable lesson. When I was diagnosed with cancer a few years later, I found myself unable to apply that lesson to my personal life. I felt a lot of guilt for needing help, and it was hard for me to ask for it. But thankfully, I never kind of had to, because the people who are closest to me rallied to be there for me, even when I would say there was no need. You don't have to come with me to this appointment, I would say, and they would come regardless. I don't know if I'll be here in a year, and they would make exciting plans for us regardless, like buy concert tickets and plan vacations. If my hope would have been purely internal or personal, it would have been extinguished by now. But in the presence of others, something different happened. After the guilt and shame of needing others was washed away, I learned an even more important lesson. Requiring someone else to carry the hope when yours runs out is not a failure of character or a weakness. It's a completely normal and natural part of being human. In her project, The Marginalian, writer and editor Maria Popova said, "The capacity for hope is not merely a hallmark of human consciousness. It is the supreme umbilical cord between consciousnesses. The antidote for my despair and the loneliness imposed on me by cancer lay solely in the hope that others held out for me when I could not." After crossing the ravine, the trees and the darkness slowly start to give way. The fortress stands before you, catching the early light the way you first saw it catch the last of it, back when it was only a reason to keep moving. Behind you, every roll, every moment the road tried to convince you it wasn't worth walking. Beside you, someone who refused to let you walk it alone. You made it. Not unscathed, not unchanged, but here. And this is where my story as your DM ends. Because the road beyond these gates, I don't know it. Nobody does. Not for the elven mage, not for me, not for any of us in this room. We are all, right now, standing at some version of these gates. Or some of you know what's stalking you in the woods, some of you can only hear it. Some of you are mid-crossing on a broken bridge, and some of you are still choosing which path to take through the woods. I've been this character for a while now, and I wrote this journey. I built these dice rolls, and I chose the wraith in the woods specifically because I know what it's like to have something dark, patient, and undying prowling at the edge of my light. And I don't know if I reach my fortress in the end. In life, there are no final encounters, no swelling music, no ending cutscene. It's always just the next roll and the one after that, scan to scan, treatment to treatment. For me, the dice have come up low. They've also come up high. And sometimes they've come up in that ambiguous middle where you're not sure if you survived the encounter or just postponed it. But every single time, the story continued. And what I know with absolute certainty is that we all have our woods, our fortresses, and our patient things waiting in the dark. And I don't know my odds or yours, and neither do you. So to pick up the dice regardless is the only way through. Thank you.